This is Global Order. I'm Hindol Sengupta. I'm very delighted that Manpreet Sethi has joined me today. Manpreet Sethi, actually, I've been chasing her for a long time to have this conversation with her. The best way, I think, to describe Manpreet Sethi is that she's perhaps one of India's most well-known nuclear theorists, nuclear analysts, and she's done a lot of work. In fact, the course I teach has many recommended readings of writings that Manpreet Sethi has done over the years, and she's a great person to try and understand at this juncture where do we stand as India in our nuclear strategy, but also what's going on in the world, even as talks, the media is full of talk that Fordow, that almost impenetrable site of Iranian nuclear weapons manufacture, most people say, will be bombed by bunker busting bombs and so on and so forth. So we live in extremely dangerous times, and therefore it's a really perfect moment to invite Manpreet Sethi to have this conversation. Manpreet, welcome.
Thank you very much, Hindol. Thanks for having me. And I mean, it's taken a while, but I think we are here at the right time to be discussing these issues.
Absolutely. Dr. Sethi, I want to begin by asking you, talk to us a little bit, because you just said what we are, and both you and I said what was happening around us or what is happening around us. Let's talk a little bit about Iran. In your opinion, Dr. Sethi, do you think this bombing of Fordow will actually happen, number one? And number two, in your opinion, how close really was Iran to actually getting nuclear weapons?
So, Hindol, we are in the midst of this bombing that is carrying on between Israel and Iran right now. Israel, for a long time, has been saying that Iran is somewhere close to a nuclear weapon. In fact, it's for the last 20 years that we've been getting American and Israeli intelligence inputs suggesting that Iran is very close to nuclear weapons. But at this juncture, that's what Israel's assessment was, and it has gone after the nuclear facilities of Iran, basically wanting to stop the possibility of Iran acquiring nuclear weapons. So will Fordow be attacked or not? I think it's a very difficult question to answer, because as President Trump himself has said, he doesn't know whether he's going to jump into this fight or not. And as has been suggested, if Fordow is to be decimated, then you would need the American help in terms of the bunker busters that will be required. So we don't know that yet. But the point is that whether Fordow is degraded or not, will that take away if there was any desire in Iran for nuclear weapons? Because the kind of security environment that Iran seems to be sort of encircled with, and if we go along with the idea that the nuclear facilities will be degraded, maybe the regime has changed, but the security concerns of Iran are not addressed, then we haven't achieved anything, because there is no way of really taking away the desire of a country when it feels that it is threatened by nuclear weapons or security establishments of the other side. So even if Fordow was to be out of the picture, already Natanz has suffered a fair bit of damage, and Natanz is important because this is where you had the centrifuges and the capability to build more centrifuges. So the equipment, the components were coming from facilities around that area. So if all of this does go away, without the security concerns of Iran being addressed in any form, any future administration is still going to look at the possibility of acquiring this in the future.
Let me ask you, if indeed in a scenario, hypothetically, if Fordow is bombed by bunker busting bombs, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the conversations I've had with many people, this facility is so deep in the mountains that probably if you use this kind of bombs to take it out, there could be other implications apart from security implications. And I now refer to environmental implications, including perhaps maybe even an earthquake of some sort, certainly, mountains collapsing and so on and so forth. All of this would be detrimental to Iranian society and Iranian people at large. And as you say, is it really or could it really be the argument that this will really explain to them that they shouldn't acquire security measures in the future, including nuclear weapons, so that this doesn't happen again? Do you, or what do you think about this scenario about environmental concerns about such a strike?
So, since nobody has a very clear idea of how deep this facility is and what would be the geological sort of dimensions of this, and whether, as you're suggesting, whether it will lead to outer atmospheric or deep inside the collapse of hills, etc., nobody has a clear idea on what this would really lead us to. And I think that's what is perhaps holding the US back, because the implications could spill far beyond what is being targeted. And as we are talking about the security concerns, I mean, apart from the physical damage that would happen, if the security concerns are not addressed, then we've had in the past very clear example of proliferation from Pakistan to Iran. In fact, the centrifuges, which are the center of concern today, and we are talking about, whether the centrifuges can be decimated so that enrichment will not happen and Iran will not be able to develop the nuclear weapon. These centrifuges actually came from Pakistan to Iran in the 1990s. And the possibility of proliferation in the future, because as I'm suggesting, if the security concerns are not addressed and the incipient desire remains within the country that to address those security threats, it has to have nuclear weapons. And after an experience like this, I'm sure that desire will only be strengthened. As I'm suggesting, if the relationship with Israel and US is not reframed in a way to become less threatening to Iran, then the possibility of proliferation from within the region, from Pakistan, from a country like North Korea, which is cash-strapped and would be looking for opportunities where it can sell nuclear material or nuclear weapons. These are all, not impossible ideas. So really, one should be extremely careful about what we are wanting for in this situation, because by way of resolving it, we might be actually deepening the crisis.
Let me take you back to a moment of solution that seemed to have arrived with Barack Obama's deal, so to speak, with Iran. That deal was, of course, later on thrown away by Donald Trump. Now, there are two opinions on this, Manpreet. Some people say that this deal was a beginning of a better future, further negotiations could have happened, and some sort of, better future, better relationship between the US, Iran, and indeed Israel could have happened. Others very strongly suggest that this was a cop-out. Iran would have never given up. It would have continued to, silently, in a hidden way, so to speak, continue to develop nuclear weapons, because the fundamental ideological basis of the Iranian regime, not the Iranian people per se, but the ruling regime, is the destruction of, quote unquote, the Jewish people and the state, and the destruction of Israel. So they would never stop, because this is not a political thing, this is an ideological thing. Which of these two arguments do you think is more potent?
I tend to weigh in the first argument in favor of that, because I do think that, if you go by the Iranian statements, and even till I think day before yesterday, there was a statement from their foreign minister saying that Iran is not interested in nuclear weapons. What Iran was standing for was having the right to have the full fuel cycle, mastery over that, as the NPT provides to all non-nuclear weapon states, which is to say that enrichment, if it is part of the fuel cycle, they should have the right to that. And given Iran's nature, it is a country that stands by those principles of what are the rights that are available to me as a member of the NPT. And if the IAEA is saying that I am, complying with my commitments, then I should have that right to enrichment. And that really was the sticking point till the time that we got to the JCPOA, which allowed for a certain amount of enrichment capability that Iran could continue to retain. So it was capped at being able to enrich uranium to about 3.67%, which is very far away from the 90+% enriched uranium that you need for nuclear weapons. So the number and the kinds of centrifuges that Iran could have was also curtailed by the JCPOA. The reprocessing route to nuclear weapons was also stopped. I think President Trump in 2018, his basic argument against this deal was that it was all time bound, that it was for about 8 years, 10 years, 15 years, and after that, Iran could return to whatever its ambitions, nuclear weapons ambitions were. But really, my understanding was that during this period of time, as Iran would have been mainstreamed, as it would have become more and more a part of the international community through financial institutions, etc., one could have addressed some of the concerns that Iran had about its being isolated from the international community. So I think the JCPOA was a very good arrangement, and the idea was uh, have intrusive verifications by the IAEA into Iran, stop it from moving towards nuclear weapons, eventually stop that capability, and also address the security concern by making it a member of the international community. I think we could have reached somewhere through that route because there is really no other answer of how you're going to address this issue that we have with the concern about Iran's nuclear weapons ambitions.
Reflect then for just a moment, Manpreet, on the Israeli viewpoint, consistent viewpoint that the Iranians were a few weeks, some say a few weeks, some say a few months, who knows, but they were very close to developing nuclear weapons or getting capabilities to develop a nuclear weapon. And inevitably, this would mark a moment of existential danger for the Israeli state, for the Israeli people, and this is something already Israel, surrounded with many issues, cannot afford, because this would really mark an existential danger for them. Reflect a little bit about this viewpoint, because this is a fairly potent and strong viewpoint that always appears on the table, and I want to know what you think about it.
Yeah, so I mean, Israel's concerns are valid. And for the longest period of time, Israel has been suggesting that Iran is moving towards nuclear weapons. Um, on the other hand, when you look at what Iran's statements are, it says that it has no ambition for nuclear weapons, but it has made some threatening statements against Israel. So, really, this relationship has to be resolved in a certain way where both sides agree that they have the right to exist. And it's not as if neighbors have not had nuclear weapons or had nuclear weapons and existed. I mean, you look at the India-Pakistan scenario. Pakistan claims that India poses an existential risk to them. They have nuclear weapons, we have nuclear weapons, and we are coexisting. So while I'm not suggesting that Iran having nuclear weapons is a good idea, but the point is that if both of them believe that they are posing a certain kind of a security threat to each other, there has to be a resolution of that. And if they are not willing to be engaged in a conversation with each other, sometimes we have seen nuclear weapons do bring a stability to a relationship. There are existential risks with nuclear weapons. I mean, there are concerns always about escalation to higher levels, but we have seen that where nuclear weapons are with countries which are seen to be in adversarial terms, there is a certain amount of stability that also comes into that relationship. So it's a complex relationship here, and both have to. I mean, the ideal situation is diplomacy, to sit down and talk about these issues. But I mean, India, and certainly after our experience with Pakistan, we found it so difficult to sit down with an adversary and have a conversation. But nuclear weapons, in a certain way, cap your conventional capability usage as well, and therefore there is a certain amount of stability that comes in.
I'm so glad you mentioned this, because this takes me to the next part of my questioning, which is that, of course, this entire thing that nuclear weapons caps your abilities at a particular level. There could be skirmishes, but they would always be under the nuclear threshold. Where on the escalation metrics would it go? The whole stability-instability paradox, so to speak. All of this was, of course, and indeed are entirely valid. But some people today question how valid exactly are they, considering the kind of, for instance, skirmishes that are happening between India and Pakistan. considering what's happening in the Ukraine war. A lot of people are beginning to ask the question, while these theories still seem to hold, for how much longer will they hold? And I wanted to ask your opinion about this.
Who knows, Hindol? Because we are, as you know, in the 80th year of the use of the nuclear weapon. One would have thought that nuclear weapons and their relevance would fade out over a period of time, but we are in a situation where nuclear weapons have become more and more central to security strategies of countries that have them. And what I see is an era of nuclear coercion that seems to have come back. Uh, you know, uh, During the Cold War, there were several instances of nuclear coercion, mostly through proxy uh, situations. So while the US and USSR were not engaged in a direct fight, except in the Cuban Missile Crisis, where and they learned several lessons from that. But apart from that, there were several other instances, and I do remember reading somewhere there are as many as 52 incidences of nuclear coercion that had taken place during the Cold War period. Uh, from then, after the end of the Cold War, there was a certain period of nuclear lull. And the idea of nuclear brinksmanship or nuclear coercion was seen to be not normal behavior. It was seen as something that had to be condemned, and what the US started calling was rogue behavior. But we seem to have returned to the age of nuclear coercion with a vengeance today. I mean, after the Russian aggression and attack on Ukraine, the nuclear brinksmanship that was used. Then in the scenario in May 2025, where Pakistan, which normally does that, it draws attention to its nuclear weapons, indulges in nuclear brinksmanship as a way to deter India. And now you are seeing another kind of coercion with Israel attack on nuclear facilities of Iran. So nuclear coercion seems to be back in business. And really, I mean, as you're suggesting, we don't know how long would it be before the risky strategies that we seem to have adopted could actually lead us to escalation. So that concern is always there, and that's why, if you remember, the doomsday clock, which gives you a sense of where we are on nuclear dangers, has put us at 89 seconds to midnight. So the dangers are certainly extremely high at this moment in time, and it will call for the attention of all of the nuclear armed states to pull each other and themselves back from the brink, because right now we are in that stage where we are pushing the nuclear envelope. Language, behavior, actions, testing of the kind that we had not seen in the past seems to be happening all at the same time. And there are so many theaters that are open, and each one of them has the nuclear shadow over it.
I cannot but ask you this question at this juncture, because you're talking about expansion and dangerous expansion of nuclear capability. There are reports, Manpreet, suggesting that China is developing 100 warheads annually, the fastest compared to any other country. Now, China is also developing its other aspects of its military, including its navy at a historic pace. But looking at the nuclear expansion of China, how do you think the world should react, and how indeed we in India should react?
So certainly we are seeing a very rapid accretion of China's nuclear capability, nuclear warhead numbers. In fact, capability in terms of the missile capabilities, the delivery systems that they have, we've been seeing that over the last 2 decades. But the numbers in the last 5 years, if one was to go by the American estimates, the numbers are increasing extremely rapidly. As you said, if they are going up as rapidly as 100 warheads every year, then it is the fastest growing nuclear arsenal at this time. Now, the important point to consider is, why is China doing this? Because China does not declare any numbers. And if we are taking this at face value, that the numbers are increasing because some silos have been detected and one is going by the American figures, why is China feeling the need to increase its numbers? Because for a very long period of time, it believed that small arsenals were enough for deterrence. And really, I think there are three reasons why China is behaving the way it is. One is survivability. they do fear that a small nuclear arsenal, in the face of the American capability with missile defense and with kinds of missiles which could be conventionally armed, but which could take away the nuclear capability of China. That is a big concern that China has, and it is looking at ways to ensure the survivability of its arsenal so that it can signal the ability to do assured retaliation and therefore cause damage to the US. The other thing I think is it's looking for parity as a way of attaining prestige or status with the US. So nuclear weapons are being seen as something that would allow it to have the same level of negotiation with the US, put it at the same pedestal, and for Xi Jinping this seems to be a very important motivation. And lastly, if there was to be any arms control with the US, then I think China is looking at building up a capability that would allow it to have some concessions to be made. So for these three reasons, I find China is going ahead and building up its capability. All of these are reasons that are driven by US. That is their primary terms of reference. But the capability build-up obviously has repercussions for India. I don't see the need for any panic addition to our own warhead numbers because of what is happening in China. Nuclear weapons do not necessitate a reciprocal parity of numbers. I think that's the philosophy or the approach that India has towards nuclear weapons. These are in a different category. You don't have to match them in terms of the warhead numbers. But certainly, I think we would need to be focused on our survivability. So exactly what China has felt vis-a-vis the US, we are feeling vis-a-vis China. And if China has the capability of the nature that could use its conventional capability against our nuclear assets, because the accuracy of China's conventional missiles, the number of China's conventional missiles are on the ascendant. And if that becomes a threat to our nuclear capability, then our focus has to be on survivability and take the necessary steps in that direction. This may include adjusting numbers while staying within the minimum bandwidth. I think India's understanding is we don't need to build the stockpile of the Cold War periods to be able to deter, but adjustment of that number might be necessary. It will be necessary to improve our deception strategies, accelerate our dispersal across platforms. So more sea-based deterrence capabilities will have to be brought in, and of course signaling, so that certainty of retaliation is communicated under all circumstances. That there is no way that even if China has more numbers, it is able to carry out what is known as a splendid first strike against India, and that India's retaliation would be enough to cause unacceptable damage to China. So I think that's where we need to keep our focus on, rather than having any kind of a panic response on warhead number increase.
Now, of course, as you're saying, many of the things we're doing is directed towards that. Indigenously building nuclear subs, for instance, is a clear example. Second strike capability, strengthening it. Also, all this talk about hypersonic missiles. I was just talking to Air Marshal G.S. Bedi about this, and the quote-unquote unstoppable missiles and so on and so forth, which of course China also supposedly has. What more could we do, Dr. Sethi, in this? Because in everything we do, as one general suggested to me, in everything we do, the Chinese resources are so much higher that it seems a bit inadequate. Any thoughts on this? What more could we do?
What more could we do on the nuclear front?
Yes, to ensure our survivability, as you say.
Yeah, so as I suggested, survivability comes from many things. So it's about numbers. It's about how you're going to keep those numbers. Where are you going to keep those numbers? How are you going to build in deception along with that? So that, and really, having dummy missiles, since we have mobility of our missiles, both road and rail mobile, all of these are very important dimensions on how you're going to enhance your survivability. See, deterrence is essentially a mind game. And if we have played it correctly through our signaling uh, and the knowledge that has been, sort of permeated into the domestic as well as the international atmosphere, that there's no way that you're going to be able to take out everything. And with nuclear weapons, causing damage is not so difficult. In terms of capability build up, another thing that I would like to mention is India has demonstrated its ability to have MIRVed missiles today, which is where one missile is able to carry multiple warheads. All of these are ways in which you would enhance your survivability. So, technologically as well as psychologically, we have to be, playing both the games in order to give this message that survivability is something that we have worked on, that we are working on, and we will be able to cause unacceptable damage to the other side.
The last topic I wanted to discuss with you, Dr. Sethi, of course, is how strong, because you've mentioned deterrence many times in the course of this conversation, how strong really is India's deterrence? And that also seems to be contested to a degree. There are some who say that actually India's 1998 tests were not that effective. We should have tested more. We should have maybe tested a megaton bomb like the Chinese, but somehow we didn't. And today we don't have the level of deterrence or the strength of deterrence that we ought to have. Also, there is a question of what kind of capabilities China has. So China supposedly has megaton bombs, 3-ton megaton bombs, and so on and so forth. And compared to that, India's capabilities do not seem adequate. Now, if you look at this argument, I know you disagree with this viewpoint. Talk to us a little bit about why you disagree and why you think what we have is adequate.
So I don't know. I mean, how would you define what is strong deterrence or perfect deterrence? The fact that we've had nuclear weapons for 26 years now, and we haven't seen the use of nuclear weapons or nuclear coercion against ourselves, is one way of judging what is the strength of your deterrence. One could argue that Pakistan indulges in acts of terror against us, and with China, we have faced the issue of skirmishes at our line of actual control. But these are not, issues that could have been resolved with nuclear weapons. So nuclear weapons were not acquired, are not existing in order to address those kinds of threats. As far as our nuclear weapons are concerned, they are in order to deter the use of nuclear weapons or the possibility of our being subjected to nuclear coercion or blackmail, and we haven't seen that. Now, nuclear testing is serious business, and it comes with very wide diplomatic ramifications. When India took this step in 1998, it did lead to economic sanctions, it led to diplomatic condemnation, and it took us a number of years to rehabilitate ourselves. And, we have reached a position today where we are a highly respected member of the international community. We are reaping the benefits of the outreach that we did at that time and the fact that we had nuclear weapons. So both things do matter. And in fact, with the exceptionalization that we got from the NSG, the Nuclear Suppliers Group, and the Indo-US nuclear deal, I think we are more engaged with the world of nuclear commerce today, something that was denied to us in the past, than ever before. Therefore, for us to test again at this time, because we are skeptical about what were the results that we achieved in our last tests, would really mean a huge upset to the apple cart. And for what do we want to do this test? You say that it is to strengthen our deterrence. I guess by strengthening our deterrence, you mean having nuclear warheads which are of higher tonnage or higher yield. Whether we have the thermonuclear capability or not, I think this is the question that has been raised again and again. And there, as you suggested, there are two schools of thought on this. There is the DRDO version and there is a Department of Atomic Energy version. Irrespective of which school of thought you want to stay with, I think deterrence is based on the idea of being able to cause damage that will cause the other side more harm than any gain that he will make. And if this is the psychological manipulation of that threat perception of the other side, it matters little whether you're doing it with a fission weapon or a thermonuclear weapon. I don't think it's going to give any cause for joy to Pakistan or to China to say, we died with with India's thermonuclear capability rather than its fission weapon. What are we talking about here? Nuclear weapons are in a different category altogether. Hindol, you remember, Hiroshima and Nagasaki were 12 and 20 kiloton nuclear weapons. And what was the damage that they caused? 80,000 people vaporized within seconds, and an equal number of people died over the next few months. So when we start talking about nuclear weapons as if these are conventional weapons and therefore you need higher tonnage to be able to cause damage, I think we forget what these weapons are all about. And that's really my concern, that, deterrence in the case of nuclear weapons is built because of the extraordinariness of these weapons. And that is something that should not be forgotten. If we go by India's admission, and here I'm talking about what people like Dr. Chidambaram, who were engaged in India's nuclear weapons program, had said, we have the capability to build 20 to 200 kiloton weapons. If these were to be dropped on a city in numbers, and if they were on one missile, as I suggested, if it was a MIRV missile carrying, this kind of an yield of warheads, do you think that would be acceptable damage for any nation? Would anything be of value enough for them to get into a nuclear exchange with India if we had this capability? So my view is that a nuclear test may be desirable if circumstances allowed it. But with the costs that will come with this, I don't think more testing is needed for deterrence. With the densities of population that we have, with the knowledge that we today have of how you would do intelligent targeting, because Hiroshima and Nagasaki were not intelligent targeting. The height at which the weapon was dropped, if that height was different and it was a ground burst, the damage could have been much more. So today we understand all of these technicalities a lot better than we did at that moment in time. And if deterrence is a mind game, then I think it needs to be strengthened by other means rather than, wanting to have to test to strengthen your deterrence. So for me, I'm not holding my breath for strengthening deterrence through more testing.
Fantastic. This, I think, is a very lucid explanation about your point of view. Thank you very much, Dr. Sethi, for taking us through all these topics. As always, it was a delight talking to you. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Hindol. It was a pleasure talking to you.